Well, good morning. It's been a while. I missed you all. Thank you all for being patient, as you always are with us. I want to walk you all through a new iteration of the community safety surcharge that we began to socialize with council members on yesterday. Essentially, this version would isolate to an even greater extent this revenue-generating proposal would extract resources from the largest companies in the city of Chicago. These are companies that have more than 500 employees. We would raise the rate per month to $33 on roughly 175 companies, which we project would raise roughly $82 million. What this fund would do, and it would continue to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, ensuring that our community violence intervention workers are supported, that we can continue our youth employment and diversion programs, services for survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence, and of course, mental health care for our first responders. What types of companies would this impact? Well, we're talking about the largest corporations, of course, in the city. We are not talking about your local retail shops, however. We are not talking about your mom and pop restaurants. We are talking about the companies who have done exceedingly well in this current economic climate. Some of these names you might recognize: J.P. Morgan, Walmart, Accenture. J.P. Morgan, for example, brought in $57 billion in profit last year. And keep in mind, you all, they received $11 billion in additional profit from the 2024 Trump tax breaks, which, as I've been saying, was the largest upward transfer of wealth in our nation's history. We're talking about banks like Citigroup, which made $11 billion last year, and companies like Mondelez, the world's largest snack company, reaching more than 150 countries. Don't misunderstand me. We are certainly proud of Chicago and Chicago being home to many of these world-renowned powerhouse companies. But $30 a month is not going to change their bottom line. What they prioritize is a talent pool, which Chicago certainly has. But to attract more people, we need to continue to drive crime and violence down. Our work is nowhere near from being complete. If we look at a company like Bank of America, for example, they made $27 billion in profit last year, an additional $4 billion from the Trump tax cuts. The community safety surcharge would account for roughly 0.0008% of their annual revenue. That's less than 1,000%. Another myth that we need to dispel is the idea that this would be a, quote, job killer, unquote. Let's remember, you all, we had this tax in place for more than 40 years. When you ask what city has this worked in, well, it worked in Chicago. And we know that it can work again. When we look at Chicago employment trends over time on the chart on the left, we see that Chicago's employment trends track closely with the national changes in employment over the past 35 years. When employment goes up nationally, it certainly goes up in Chicago. When it falls nationally, it also falls in Chicago. We do not find a sustained explosion, we do not again find a sustained explosion in jobs after the repeal. In fact, it is difficult to tell where on this chart the repeal even happens because the trend remains constant. On the right, we see Chicago's comparative employment growth over the national average for the past 20 years. What you'll see is the period while we still had the corporate head tax had stronger job growth compared to the national average than the periods after repeal. This cuts directly against the idea that there is any correlation whatsoever between local marginal taxes and overall economic growth. And when we look at the cost of the repeal, we see that Chicagoans have lost out on more than $240 million in revenue that could have funded city services, that could have helped solve our structural deficit, that could have kept mental health clinics open. Instead, Chicagoans got higher property taxes, more regressive fines and cuts to services, while large corporations essentially got a tax cut. When you look at the combined tax rates of major cities, accounting for all the relevant direct and indirect taxes, you can see that Chicago has one of the lowest corporate tax rate of any major city in the country. We have the lowest of the 3 largest cities and the 4th lowest of the top 4 municipal economies. So in summary, number 1, the new model we are putting forward, responding to what we have heard from alders and residents, focuses on just the top few hundred companies. Number 2, the new model accounts for less than 0.1% for these companies. Number 3, a job boom failed to materialize. Number 4, the repeal cost Chicagoans hundreds of millions of dollars that was made up for in property taxes, regressive fines and cuts. And finally, contrary to what you will read in the editorial boards, Chicago lags other major cities and taxing corporations to fund vital services for our residents. I do appreciate the special attention to today's presentation, and with that, me and my administration are happy to take any of your questions.
Okay, we'll do one and one. And just a reminder, it's not mandatory to ask a question, so if you don't have one, just keep it going.
Good morning, Mayor. If the council does not pass a budget by the 31st, what happens, in your view, to city services, to paychecks for employees, and so on?
Well, thank you for that. Again, I'm working overtime to avoid such a scenario. We all know that the last time a budget was this contentious is when Mayor Harold Washington was the mayor, and there was a block of 29 that were quite obstinate against the efforts to transform our economy. And so that's why our team is working overtime, repeating our desire to continue to build a coalition that allows for the city of Chicago to be a model for the rest of the country. So as I expressed yesterday, that scenario we're working to avoid, and obviously we're not the federal government. There would be severe consequences if such a thing were to take place.
Like missing paychecks and city services not being implemented.
If the government is not funded, that is just one example of how horrific that would be for working people. Let me also say that if this budget sacrifices working people in order for it to be balanced, that is a scenario that we are working to avoid as well. We don't believe layoffs and furloughs is a healthy approach towards balancing our budget, particularly not at this time.
I want to get your reaction to the Federal Transit Administration threatening to withhold some funds from the CTA unless the city and state increase law enforcement. They were citing the attack on Bethany McGee. What's your response to that, and will you make any changes to how CPD is deployed to the trains and buses?
Well, as I've said over and over and over and over and over and over again, public safety is my top of the top priorities. And that's why we are working on ensuring that we make the necessary investments so that people will continue to ride our public transportation system and that they can do it safely. The feeling and the emotion and the experience of having crime occur on our public transportation system is certainly detrimental to our city as a whole. And so that's why, whether it's with funding, making sure that there are safety and security measures in place, making sure that our public transportation system is supported with entities that address homelessness and as well as mental health. It's a full force of government approach. And we're going to continue to collaborate with the state and the county and all of our partners to ensure that every single rider feels absolutely safe.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
What will the new revenue projection from this revised corporate head tax mean for the buckets of categories that the revenue funds, like gender-based violence, officer wellness, all of those categories? Do you have updated revenue projections, and what's most affected by this $18 million loss?
What are you referring to?
So this new revised corporate head tax would be $82 million.
Yeah.
So what's most affected by that drop from $100 million to $82 million?
The program for small business grants would not be funded, but all of
I
the
got you. So all of the other categories would remain at the same
Yes.
revenue projections?
That's correct.
Okay. Some of the 26 alders, as you know, have taken issue with who oppose your budget, have taken issue with you personally not showing up to the meetings this past weekend. Are you considering, as you talk about this revised corporate head tax, personally showing up to pitch it to alders who oppose your budget?
I'm terribly sorry that they feel that way, especially because I've had regular interactions with city council members on a consistent basis. Keep in mind, that was one meeting. Do you know how many meetings we've had with alders around this budget? Dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings. Right, so I do appreciate their desire to see my face, and I have the best, most capable, competent, loving, compassionate individuals that work overtime in this administration. They spend 8 hours on Saturday going through line by line by line. Now, mind you, these alders have had the budget for 2 months. We started the process back in January, hosting community meetings. Even after I presented the budget, we've done town halls. Many of you have participated in those town halls. This certainly does not lack, transparency. As I've said over and over again, there's nothing surreptitious about how we deliver, and showcase our work. So I was on the phone last night with a couple of alders. Quite frankly, I've been talking to faith leaders, business leaders. I talk to more people, in my life now that I may she rest in peace. My mother would remind me growing up that I talked a lot. I'll say it like that. And boy, Mommy, if you could see me now.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Has the business community, any specific groups, been consulted already about this revised head tax proposal, and do you believe it's something that they're more amicable to?
Well, do I believe the Bears can get into the playoffs? I don't know if it's, appropriate for me to, put an over-under on, a belief. What I can tell you is that we're working within the confines of the facts. And the facts do matter here. That, CEOs have said to me repeatedly, Mayor Johnson, we need you to confront head on the issue of violence in this city. And I took that challenge and I take it seriously. And they've also said they believe in the programs that we're investing in. CVI, check. They believe in youth employment, check. In fact, many of these corporations, we're working with them to help us expand youth employment. So, we've had constant conversations with interest groups that have expressed opposition to them paying 0.0008% into community safety. The last thing that I will attempt to say around this is that this is an investment. The return on this investment from our largest corporations would be to save more lives and to create more opportunities for people. That's a worthwhile investment.
And for the roughly 350 companies that would be
175. Is that correct?
it said 350
I know.
on the slide.
It was not updated.
It's
so apologies.
175?
It's actually 175.
Regardless, for the roughly 175 companies that would be affected, do you have a dollar figure for how much that would translate to monthly and annually for those companies?
Thank you for the homework assignment. If that number is important to you, we'll try to do that math. Jill, thank you.
Good morning. Do you plan to work with the CTA at all to address these safety demands from the FTA?
Do I plan to work? We work with the CTA all the time.
Are there specific measures that you'd like to see as you
as we
receive?
talked about, like these investments, again, as I've said repeatedly, we do have to look at what the security apparatus looks like for public transportation. CPD plays a role in that. The City Department of Public Health plays a role in that. All of us play a role in ensuring that CTA riders experience maximum safety.
They sent a letter. Do you plan to respond to the FTA?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we heard from one rider this morning that they think it might be an overreach from the federal government to send you and the governor a letter to make these demands. Do you feel that way?
I believe that what this administration is doing, there's no question that they have not only trampled on our Constitution, but, I don't need a letter from the Trump administration to tell me what my priorities are, because we've already made them clear what our priorities are. And we certainly, do not need an administration that continues to politicize, on what really could be addressed collectively. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
How are you? This is another question about the transportation letter that was just sent overnight. Last question with this is basically you all don't have a permanent leader over CTA right now. So how does that put more pressure on you and other leaders here in the city and within the county to try to make this safer for riders?
Yeah, there's no pressure there. No.
Morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
I'm wondering if you put this new proposal out, do you figure this is going to give you, allow you to pick off a few of the opposition alders, as I might call them, and will you then go ahead and present a budget in the coming days or next week to get a vote on your plan?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, there are some alders that have expressed a desire to concentrate this revenue stream for community safety to a more hyper group of corporations. This does that. In fact, one thought was if we establish this revenue stream using the guidelines of what the federal guidelines constitute as a small business, I put that in quotations intentionally, this certainly addresses that. But it also ensures that the people who still believe that this is a worthwhile investment, that it protects us in that regard as well, right? Because there are a number of alders that have made it very clear that absent this community safety fund, they would have a difficult time supporting this budget, right? So do I think that this places us in a stronger position? I do, because, again, you all have asked, and I've repeatedly demonstrated my willingness to have compromise around the details of my values. Here is yet another example where our values and investing in community safety are maintained, and negotiating the details around that to ensure that we can still accomplish it. That's what this proposal does. Now, in terms of when we actually put it up on the board, we'll talk with our IGA team. I'm ready to go now, right? I mean, I believe that the budget that I presented was ready to go. As you have seen, it's not like much has changed. We're really discussing one particular component of the budget, which I understand there's a strong desire to protect the largest corporations and the ultra wealthy. There is a strong desire for some to do that, and they're not asking for that level of protection, so I don't know what people are getting from it, but the people that I've been charged to protect are the working class folks who make this city the amazing city that it is.
So you were asked this question, but didn't really hear an answer to the question about discussions with the business community about this corporate head tax. You've repeatedly said they say their number one priority is safety, so we get that. But have you had any conversations where you've tried to sell them on this?
It's not about selling it. I mean, we've had repeated conversations. That no one has been missing from this conversation. You've seen all of their write-ups, right? But yes.
What have they said to you then about this head tax?
They don't like it. They don't want to pay it. That's what they've said. They don't want to pay it. Like, that hasn't changed, right? They do not want to pay it. But here's the thing. They're not the only group that if you offer up a tax, they're going to say me, 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 right? What I find, well, I'll just be honest here, what I find disturbing about all of it is that they never come back in a transparent, open way, offering up a true alternative. And then when they finally did it, you saw what they proposed, doubling the garbage fees. So imagine this, if you are, a single mother who is uneasy about whether or not their child is going to have access to special education, or if you are a working dad and you're trying your best to provide for your family, and you are now standing in lines after you get off work to make sure there's enough food. And the debate is whether or not that single mom, that working dad, should double the amount of garbage fees versus these super, super large corporations that have made billions of dollars over the course of the last year. Should they put in 0.001% to balance this budget? That is a really unbalanced, unfair system to even make that a choice, because for me it's pretty clear.
Hello, Mayor.
Hi, and you should just know you did motivate our presentation today. So thank you for that question. No, that's that, and I just want to lift that up, is because like my responsibility is to make sure that we're not just engaging, but the questions that you ask, I want to make sure that there's a thorough, complete response. That's just how it was raised. So thank you, Mary Ann, for giving us a homework assignment last night.
I was a former teacher.
Yes, you were.
But I have a question, a clarification, actually.
Okay.
The numbers that you used today, you say you've missed out on $240 million. You're using 2012 numbers. You don't take into account COVID. I don't know if that argument is accurate for.
Yeah, I mean, look, if that's a fair analysis. The point, though, is we've lost out on hundreds of millions of dollars as a result of this tax going away, and it's also proven because you all were there covering those budgets. How many years in a row did the previous administration raise property taxes, and by what amount? How many new fines and fees went up? You all covered that, so that did not change. But the validity of whether it's $240 million or $219 million or $180 million, the point is that we lost considerable amount of revenue.
And a viewer reached out to me that when you mentioned yesterday 18 cranes, that this viewer, who seems to be well-sourced, says it's 6, not 18.
Okay, so this person obviously wasn't paying attention. I said that there are 6 cranes that are up and 18 approved.
So we'll see those, and those are not demolition cranes. Those are for building projects.
This is development. So let them know that it's a worthwhile investment in the city of Chicago, because there are big corporations who obviously believe that.
And just one last one. As for security on the CTA, is it time for security to carry guns? The dogs do not seem to be effective.
Well, look, that's a decision that I believe is one that needs to be made collectively. What I've said repeatedly, we have to do the things that work. Is there a role for CPD? Of course. Is there a role for security to help, support our riders? Absolutely. Are there other ways in which we can also address the challenges that CTA has, particularly around homelessness and mental illness? Absolutely. It requires all of it, but I don't know if it's, my position at this time to make that absolute declaration without having a more robust conversation there.
You're not saying no.
I'm saying that that's not a decision that I will make in isolation. All right. Hey.
Came in late. So I heard most of the presentation. I was listening on the live stream. But one thing, the economy, Chicago's economy has changed since 2014 a lot, right?
Yeah.
And back in 2024 at a subcommittee on revenue hearing, your administration was asked about the head tax. And I'm sorry, at the time I attributed this to Annette, but I re-listened yesterday, and I think it might have actually been Jill that said this. So sorry, but it said, we are not at full capacity. We have a lot of vacancies. We have corporations that are making decisions about whether or not they're going to stay hybrid. We have to think intentionally about how circumstances change. The head tax in particular relies on actual employees being in the city. That was a year ago. Do you think that the city is now at a place in terms of downtown vacancies that the head tax, that those concerns that you flagged then are no longer valid?
Well, look, the concerns around ensuring that that government shifts towards the direction that our economy is going in, we are addressing that, right? Because our economy is becoming more digitized. And so that's why a year later we have the smart tax. It's why we are, doggish about the repurposing of downtown vacancy into housing and including affordable housing. There are developers that are putting their resources up front without any city assistance because they see the trajectory of our economy. As far as like how, we have calculated this particular latest iteration of this community safety surcharge, I still believe reflects what is still very strong about, our economy, that we do have the most dynamic world-renowned companies that are situated here. Annette talks about this all the time. People talk about Ken Griffin leaving, but his people didn't. Citadel's still here. So, between, I think to your colleague's question about the 6 cranes and the 18 that are committed, the 1901 project, the redevelopment of downtown LaSalle Street, our airports are busier than they've ever been. There's a reason why Disney Studios wants to come and count the new year down in Chicago. People are interested in Chicago. The one thing that I could say that Donald Trump has done effectively for the people of Chicago, he's made more people pay attention to what we've already known. So, yeah, I think it's an example of how we contemplate, even our own assertions. Right. So, but no, it did not obviously prevent us from moving forward with it.
Of the 300, or what did you say?
Sorry, 175.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's our fault.
It's okay. Of the 175, have you guys done a breakdown, or will you do a breakdown and provide to the council of, how many of those companies are manufacturing or downtown business?
John, do you want to?
Where are they across the city?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yep.
A good question. Our analysis is based on the historical data we have from when this tax was previously in place. We cannot release the specifics of that because it's confidential taxpayer information. But that combined with publicly available information in terms of publicly traded companies is how we're modeling.
Do you just have like a breakdown of not specific numbers, but even like
the types of businesses?
Of them might be in manufacturing or warehouses.
We might be able to do that. Yeah. Look, we had an alderman who asked for that. I was on a call last night with an alderman. I want to keep saying that so people know that I work nonstop. And that was essentially what he was getting at. These are very, very thoughtful questions, and have a very thoughtful team that will ensure that those responses are available.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So my question, I'm going to go back to the CTA. The Trump administration, not only the first term, but now his second term, has made a number of threats aimed at the city of Chicago. Many, if not most, never come to fruition. This latest threat of withholding money for the CTA, do you perceive this as a real threat that the city could be losing the money?
Look, I take all of his threats seriously. Right. It's no secret here that President Trump spends more time thinking about my job than actually doing his. I do find it quite provocating that the very areas in which he has threatened our city are all of the demands post the Civil War: education, transportation, housing, good paying jobs, and health care. Those are all the areas that he's threatening. Right. And, quite frankly, his behavior is mired in ignorance. I think it was James Baldwin that said that ignorance and power allied is the most ferocious threat to justice. So, of course, we take him seriously, but I think your point is well taken. Every single lawsuit that he has filed against us, we prevailed and we beat it. And every single lawsuit that we have administered against the Trump administration, we've prevailed. We take his threats absolutely seriously, and the president needs to work on being a partner with American cities and not as an adversary. I can't remember the last time outside of the Civil War where a president was more determined to disrupt our democracy. And it's about time that this country continues to rise up and challenge this administration to defend cities like Chicago and not use his apparatus as a means to attack and work to disrupt and destroy the very things that so many of our people fought and died for.
And then a question on the budget. I know you said even today that you're working to make sure that a budget does get passed by the deadline. Yeah. Is there are there people working on a contingency if it isn't, and to make sure that if that has to happen, things will be able to go as orderly as possible?
Well, let me just reiterate that I'm working overtime to ensure that we pass a budget that's balanced and that we don't sacrifice working people and that we avoid a shutdown. The City Council does have an opportunity to respond to now this proposal. It is their responsibility at this point to give me some feedback and to ultimately pass this budget. I have, again, made the full force of government available to people, and in the event that the City Council does not respond and pass this budget in time, of course I'm having conversations about the worst case scenario.
Morning.
Good morning.
Mark Armstrong with the Deep South Press Corps. So circling back to the story that I broke initially this past summer about Walter Burnett Jr., are you saying that by doubling down on him as your choice for Chicago Housing Authority CEO, that you're willing to risk a federal takeover of CHA? And does that not smack of mayoral overreach on a CHA Board of Commissioners that's supposed to operate independently?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, my support of the former alderman, the former vice mayor, is firmly situated based upon his experience and expertise, as well as his ability to get things done. As far as the responsibility that the Board of Commissioners have to, react to my recommendations, that is not an overreach. That is the proper course of governance. Look, my
but you've been
position
saying
has
that
not,
he's definitely going to be the CEO.
I'm saying that he is still my choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not putting any pressure on CHA to make him the permanent CEO, although he's your preferred choice.
I don't place pressure on anyone.
Okay. Got it. Second question. So why should foundational Black American Chicagoans trust you on doing the right thing with your reparations task force when you and some of its members revealed during a Bronzeville event last week that they're being weaponized to pressure the alder folk into supporting your proposed budget?
Could you restate the last part, the suffix of your
okay.
Question?
When they're saying this, and this was an event.
Who's they?
Supposedly.
Who's they?
They being the members of the reparations task force. My cauldron of sources say that you and several members of the reparations task force appeared at an event at the Chicago Bee Library, during which they said that they were going to partner, or you all were going to partner on putting pressure on the aldermen and alderwomen to approve your version of the budget for 2000.
Oh, I think I understand your premise of your question, that the reparations task force is being used as a pressure point for the budget.
Right.
That's not true.
Right. Supposedly they said that,
it's not true.
That
Look,
they couldn't go ahead with the work of the task force
until
the budget was passed.
Well, that's a mischaracterization. Here's what exists. The budget that we secured for the task force, that budget was secured in the last year's budget. This year's budget that we're currently living under. So the two are, in this regard, are mutually exclusive. All right,
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate your time. We got it. Mark, we gotta keep moving. Okay. Thank you, Mark.
How you doing, Mayor Johnson?
Overjoyed. It's that time of the year. 'Tis the season to be jolly.
I can sense the joy from here, sir. A question about the community safety surcharge and the revisions to it. These are also companies that are best suited and best positioned to tell their workers, hey, guess what? You're going to start working in Downers Grove now, 5 days a week, in order to avoid this taxpayer. How does this revised proposal deal with the possibility of an increase in remote work by some of the very companies that it is targeting?
Thank you for that question.
Hi.
This tax, as the mayor stated, is 0.0008% of a typical payroll or revenue. That is not enough to pick up your entire corporation and move to the suburbs. What companies rely on is a talent pool. And what attracts the smartest, most capable residents to this city, whether they come here for college, they were raised here, they can stay here, is having the safest, most affordable big city in the country. And so we believe that by investing in community safety, we can continue to build an incredible talent pool for these corporations.
But it's possible, isn't it, Ms. Yoon, that there are people who are working in Chicago-based offices and they may live in suburbs of Chicago and may in fact be asked by those companies, guess what, you can work from home now.
I mean, look, anything is possible, right? I mean, right. So, but if you're asking us to base all of our decisions on speculation, then you couldn't make a decision at all. I mean, it is very much possible that if the proposal to double garbage fees, that could cause greater exodus within black communities. That's also possible, right? It's also possible that if, we cut the budget based upon what has been proposed for youth employment and 5,000 less young people have access to jobs, it's possible that a percentage of those individuals could end up getting harmed, right? I think the point, though, that we're really trying to drive down is people want to be in Chicago. These huge corporations are not going to make a financial decision based upon what essentially could be a rounding error. It's going to cause people more to leave. In fact, remember when Ken Griffin threatened to leave? Citadel is still here. These are threats that are made constantly, right? And we just went through a presentation where it's demonstrated that of all the major cities, we have a friendlier environment for corporations than New York and Los Angeles. And I think to Jung's point around the talent pool, I was just with some students at Loyola, and it was about a group of 50 students there. At Loyola, roughly 65 or 67% of students who attend Loyola who are not from Chicago stay in Chicago. We know that there is an incredible attraction to the city, and we already saw last year 22,000 more people reside in the city of Chicago that did not prior. And it was the first time in over a decade where there was actual population growth. So again, building safe and affordable communities is the best thing that you can do for economic vibrancy.
I'll do this real quick, based on the transit thing. Mm-hmm. Are you personally frustrated that, as you refer to them, isolated incidents of violence on the CTA are getting outsized attention based on factors outside the city?
Well, look, I think every time I receive a report, and this happens every day, of an act of violence, it does affect me, and it is frustrating, and it does affect me in a personal way. Here's something. last night and the night before, there were 2 acts of violence, and they were both suicides. Yes, that's it is frustrating, and it is hard to absorb that every single day. And as much as I recognize that those acts of violence that garner more attention, it doesn't just frustrate me, it drives me to want to get it right. I had a really humbling experience a couple of weeks ago. I won't tell you how late I was out because I don't want you to judge me. But I went out to this late gathering right after Thanksgiving. I was invited, and I was in the room, and from across the room, I hear Mr. Johnson. Someone screaming from across the room, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson. It was one of my former students. And there's something very humbling, maybe even something wrong about being at a party that late at night with one of your former students who's now 30 years old. And, first of all, she called me Mr. Johnson. She didn't call me Mr. Mayor, which tells you, Marianne, that the position as a teacher is a far hierarchy in terms of relevance. And as a teacher, and she said, Mr. Johnson, you were just so strict. You were so strict. And I said, well, because I didn't think it was good for children to jump out of windows. That was not me being strict. I was just trying to keep you alive. And, we had this little back and forth about how difficult of a time we had. I'll just tell you a quick little story. I had her in 7th and 8th grade, but those 7th graders, when they were in 5th grade, their teacher got sick. So they essentially lost a year because they had a substitute teacher. When they got to 6th grade, the teacher who had them was a retiring librarian, so it wasn't a good fit. And then when they got to 7th grade, they got a brand new teacher. I mean, this is a recipe for a disaster or a really good movie one day. And fast forward, as difficult of a year that was, we get to March in that year, and this student and another student, they were coming up the stairs, and I was standing by the door, and this was the most humbling experience I've ever had as a teacher. As they saw me at the door, they looked at each other and they said, dang, Mr. Johnson don't ever get sick. Like, dang, you mad at me for coming to work? and I'm saying that to say is that as difficult as it was, all it does is it drives me to want to get it right. Is what I'm getting at. And so when I hear and we experience these type of incidents that get more attention, that doesn't deter me. It doesn't reduce, my approach. It just makes me more determined to show up, even sometimes when you're not always 100%.
Mayor, can I ask you to that point, what are specific steps that you would take, the FTA requiring the safety plan pretty quickly and implementation quickly? What steps will people see? We know you're not decided yet on whether officers would carry guns, but what changes can be made?
Well, I mean, look, the good news is that we do have an influx of revenue that is coming to Chicago. And, with that revenue, it allows us to actually expand, many of the things that we're already doing. And so, again, this is a very robust moment in our city's history where, again, whether it's determining what the footprint of CPD needs to be, there's some considerations there. What does a unified security system particularly look like for all of transportation? That's been discussed. Again, how do we make sure that individuals who are traumatized are receiving services that are trauma informed? There are steps that we can take around there, and again for housing and permanent housing and opportunities for individuals who use a transportation system as housing. There are greater resources that can be added there, but just keep in mind that we've already begun to make shifts in our approach. And look, we've had some real tough moments. I can admit that. And we are still moving in the right direction overall, as a city, including on our transportation system.
Will we see officers on trains?
I mean, again, there are a number of things that we should, keep in mind and have for consideration. Those things are ultimately to be determined by having robust conversations with our interim, CEO, talking to the CTA board, talking with our superintendent, because again, whatever decision or however decisions are made, shifting has to take place, right? We're having a conversation about our budget right now, and people want to cut services, right? So, which would include cuts to our first responders, and that's why we're holding the line there, that we can make sure that we're protecting all of Chicago. All right, thank you for that. You're welcome.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
Your
you
team
dropped something there. I don't know if that's relevant.
Nah, okay.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Your team has listed the frozen red line extension whenever it sums up the current list of Trump cuts. If so, why haven't you paused construction or sued to release those funds?
Do we have a lawsuit pending yet? I would have to talk to Mayor Richardson Laurie about that. But I believe we have a lawsuit already in motion because what he is doing, we know is illegal and unconstitutional. But we'll have Mary follow up with you. But I do believe we already have litigation put forward.
Cool. And I want to talk about budget strategy, political strategy here.
Okay.
You've called opponents like Michael Sachs a coward. You've said city council members who disagree with you want to raise property taxes, which of course they say that they don't want to do. And some of your allies have targeted moderate progressives with ads. What is that approach? Why are you taking it? Is it working?
Why do you believe I'm doing all of that?
I mean, the first two are
You're
things
talking about the
I've seen you say.
so do you want me to respond to what my opinion is of how colleagues interact with one another or how allies?
No, I mean, the first two are things I've
why don't you repeat the first two and let's leave the last one off?
Well, for instance, you've called Michael Sachs, you talked about a cowardly approach.
Yeah, that is a cowardly approach, right? So you have people who are hiding behind one individual, and they won't disclose who they actually are and why they have raised $10 million to attack working people. I do believe that's cowardly. Like, if you believe that working people should be sacrificed, then come out and just say who you are. So that is cowardly.
Mm-hmm. And the other part you asked was, saying, for instance, that city council members want to raise property taxes, which
they do. They just, look, that's not, I don't know if that's like a political, I don't think this is a political conversation. Let's just stick within the confines of the facts. There are city council members that do want to raise property taxes. And everyone in this room knows, because those conversations have been had. Now, of course, they didn't put it forward when the rubber met the road, but they do want to do that, right? And, in terms of like what's working, there was a poll that was taken. 74% of Chicagoans believe that large corporations should pay their fair share in taxes. This is, to me, this is actually, the fundamentals to what it means to serve, particularly the most vulnerable. And as I've said, over and over again, that I don't know if people really, I want to make sure I say this the right way, okay? I'll just speak from my vantage point. I come across people who are in economic despair every day, and I'm sure other elected officials do the same, but it never leaves me. It's like when Jesus said that the poor will always be amongst you, when he challenged his disciples. I believe I interpret it as long as we continue to ignore the harsh reality of poverty, it makes it difficult for it to go away. I don't want people to be poor. I don't want working people to have to deal with the impossible decision of food, medicine, rent, mortgage, gas money for the car, or a couple of dollars to put their child on the CTA. Like, those are decisions that are being made every single day. And families are hurting in ways that political theater won't solve. I am trying to solve the systemic economic oppression that has existed in this city for a very long time. That's all. I don't get anything personal out of it. There's nothing for me to gain economically for it. I have one job right now, and I love doing it. And I believe that Chicago is in an amazing position to demonstrate to the rest of the country that 0.0008% could literally create thousands of opportunities for people to drive violence down. I cannot think of a better investment that our city can make than in investing in the things that keep people safe. All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you.